My illness is chronic, but my ass is iconic. Right. I'm keeping that in. We have tea. Tea is the calm stuff. Okay. I don't want to boast myself here, but this is a really nice tea. It's the best one I've had all day. Sorry, Mum. I know you made me one earlier, but I somehow topped myself there. Hello everybody, I hope you're having a good day wherever you are in the world. Now I apologise for the lack of uploads. I have been extremely busy with college recently and I have not had any downtime or just alone time really. My time from work and home has not been divided evenly at all. It's been very complicated and just work is annoying, but it's gonna get me somewhere in the future. Where it's gonna get me, I don't bloody know. I'm just hoping further education, maybe one day. But for now, this is a video you're gonna get, so why did I just punch myself? Today I'm going to talk about an issue that has been affecting me personally for the past few years, if not longer, and that is inaccessibility for disabled people. Now, when I used to think about inaccessibility, it was never really on my radar. It was kind of something that didn't pop up for me before I became chronically ill because I was fairly healthy. I didn't need to book trains in advance. I didn't need to book flights in advance. I didn't need to ask for accessibility help. So that was never really on my sort of viewpoint as of far. But now it's come to a point where I'm having to do all of these things and it is overwhelming. It is something that is so chronically underfunded and so under-researched that trying to ask for help as a disabled person is like trying to ask for gold in a coal mine. It's literally non-existent when you really think about it. Although I've had some really good experiences having wheelchair access and accessibility pretty much fairly over the country as well as abroad, there is still some problems that the system lacks, which is trying to help disabled people. And unfortunately, I have been kind of victim to one of many different sort of inaccessibility issues, and that is just trying to get from point A to point B, whether that is going into town for the day, whether that's going into my college, or whether that's going up to London to have an appointment. There are still issues trying to get there because I myself am having to use a lot of mobility aids at the minute, so it is very difficult for me to try and just go somewhere on my own without having to pre-plan in advance. And I think one thing that I struggle with immensely is the fact that you have to ask for this in such a very weird and obscure way. You have to kind of out yourself as a disabled person by saying, "Hi, me over here, I need some help." And sometimes that can be quite sort of scary. It's very anxiety provoking. There's no system that can gently introduce you to a very calm and neutral environment by saying, "Hi, I would like some help, I'm in a wheelchair." It's more, tell me everything that you've had in the past 2 years and then we might book you a space on a train. It's really odd way of going about it. And there are kind of things that you can talk about, like accessibility as a whole is good. I'm not saying it's bad, but there are still problems with it. You know, I hear people say all the time, well, you should be thankful that, you know, you've got a lift pass, or you should be thankful that there are disabled toilets. And I'm like, yeah, but the disabled toilet had a mop and bucket in it, had no soap and no toilet roll. So it's not very disability friendly if I can't access my hygiene needs. And for a lift pass, it's the same sort of example, you know. I can't just say, oh yeah, it's great I have a lift pass because, you know, I get to go up 4 flights of stairs without even thinking about it. You know, it's something that you're just sitting there like, why am I lucky to have accessibility when it's not something that should even be really thought about in that way? Like, it's kind of one of those issues that you sit there and think, everyone has a counter argument for being grateful that you get something. I've had a lot of people say to me that it doesn't matter I'm deaf, at least I can lip read, and I'm like, well, there's still a massive problem there, I can't hear. So whether I can read your lips or not is out of the question. And I find it really annoying. Without trying to ramble on too much, I actually want to stick to a point, but it is entirely frustrating as a whole to be a disabled teenager in England trying to have accessibility whilst maintaining a full-time education. It's literally zero. Like, trying to gain accessibility is good in the education system, but outside of that, there are so many issues. There are numerous different topics I want to cover in this video because I think that they need to be all pinpointed, and I don't think I'm going to get to them all on time, but we're going to keep it as sharp to the point as possible. One of the issues I wanted to really talk about is wheelchair access. Now, this is something that has been around for pretty much decades, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, so if I'm speaking out of tone, please feel free to let me know. But wheelchair accessibility has been around for a very long time, and it's not like it goes unnoticed. You know, you have ramps to places, you have flat paths and everything else, and although I am grateful that I am able to get from one place to another in a wheelchair, it doesn't come without risks and hazards. You know, if I'm going downtown, I'm having to think, right, I'm in a wheelchair, so I'm obviously going to get someone to drive me there. They're going to push me around in the wheelchair, which means that I'm in a place that might have drop curbs. I might be in a place where there is no accessibility on like street lamps and stuff like that. Not street lamps, what are they called? Crossings, that's what they're called, crossings. I'm having to think about all of these things without really, when I shouldn't really need to. You know, I shouldn't have to be thinking before I go somewhere, oh, I need to make sure that I remember not to go down this street because there's not a drop curb, and if there's no drop curb, my wheelchair can't go down it because it means that there's a ricochet effect and it also puts more pain on my body. And that's something that I shouldn't have to think about. You know, I shouldn't have to think about that, as well as, oh, I must avoid these kind of pathways because they're normally full of litter and it could get stuck in my wheels, and I don't really want dog trash on my wheels. I'm gonna be funny. It happened once, my mum tried to clean it, it didn't really go to plan. Please pick up your dog fecal matter, please. Stuff, it just, it goes without questioning that these are the kind of issues that disabled people have to face on a daily basis. I know people who are bound to a wheelchair, whereas I am an ambulatory wheelchair user, which means that I can use the wheelchair as and when I need to. I can still walk, but I will still need the wheelchair. And it frustrates me that even though people claim there's accessibility for disabled people, there's really not a lot of it. You know, you sit outside on your local park bench and you think, oh, I walked over on a drop curb next to a crossing earlier. That's great, but imagine when a traffic jam fills up that crossing. I've had numerous times in London where I've been next to a crossing in my wheelchair, and just as I'm about to cross, someone has come over the white line and gone in front of that drop curb, and I'm just like, how the hell am I supposed to get up onto the pavement now? So I'm having to naturally think about this in order to try and ease my worries. It's a nightmare. And another thing with disability access is that people claim all the time, oh yeah, you've got disabled toilets. Disabled toilets are open all the time. No, they're not. They are public toilets. They're not open all the time. And even if they are, I'm going to be quite frank with you, they're normally very unhygienic. There's mops and buckets in there. There's, for some reason, unknown fluid on the floor. Someone has trashed it, destroyed the toilet seat, made the sink pretty much indisposable, and you're sitting there going, oh yeah, that's great, because that's exactly what I needed to alleviate my stress, didn't I? You know, I understand that there are things that are never going to be perfect, but the fact that there are these services for disabled people, but people cannot access them because they are disabled. That is the main problem. And I know sometimes people might say things like, oh, but at least you've got this and that. And I'm like, yeah, but you haven't really thought about how we're going to get those things. Just because people can get DLA, PIP, just because they can get a sunflower lanyard, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easy for them. Having accessibility puts so many things in your brain that you didn't need to be there. So pre-planning is something that comes natural, I think, to most people, but to disabled people is kind of inbred that, you know, you need to plan your journey like to the street name, let alone to the actual hour. It is kind of something unheard of, really, and there's no awareness of it. And if there is, people are like, oh, but you should be grateful, and it's like, no, I'm pissed. And I find that it's not just street accessibility or public restrooms that need more attention. There's also something that I've had recently where doctors are starting to sort of have this problem with accessibility. I recently went for an MRI, and that was up in London, so I obviously had to take my wheelchair. And if you don't know, I am deaf, just my hair covers it very well. And I got into the appointment, and they were doing this kind of background check to make sure that I was okay going in. I had a lot of medical history I need to cover. It's kind of the length of 20 people, if you get what I mean. And she said to me, this doctor, she said, oh, when you're in the MRI machine, it's going to be pretty loud. And she said, have you ever been in one before? And I went, yes, I've been in an MRI numerous times, but I should say that I am deaf, so it's probably going to take a while for me to respond to questions because I can't hear you. And she went, well, you can hear me now, so I'm pretty sure that's a good start. And I'm like, no. An MRI and a doctor's office is completely different scenarios. You can't just say, oh, because you can hear me well now, in 10 minutes when you're in this magic metallic cylinder and it's so noisy it feels like you're going to explode in there, you'll hear me just fine. It's like I could barely hear the soundtrack they were playing to me, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, no, I can't hear you as well. And I think because a lot of disabilities are either hidden or they're invisible, it makes it 10 times harder for people to access stuff that they really need to. It's only just recently that long-term effects of COVID has come into light, and stuff like chronic fatigue syndrome and chronic widespread pain has actually been paid attention to. And as much as I am grateful that people are getting the help and support they needed, so many people have struggled in the background for such a long and vast amount of time that there is really a sort of cry out for help from all of us. You know, we're kind of left on the sidelines to sort of defend our own battles, and some people can get it easier. That's just the way it is. And I think people often forget that with deafness, it's not just a disability, it's kind of a way of life. And for me, I've been used to it for over 15 years. And I've not had to get used to a hearing life and then switch over to hard of hearing life. It's kind of just been very in me that I'm deaf, and I've never really known what it's like to hear fully. But with deafness comes its own problems with accessibility. That I can't hear on phone calls very well. Studying at home on Zoom was an absolute nightmare. I study a full-time animal management course, and I cannot explain to you how frustrating it was when I couldn't hear the tutors, when there were no captions on the videos, and basically when meetings would get cut short, my internet would cut out, or I just plainly couldn't understand what the tutor was saying. You know, sometimes they wouldn't have their cameras on and they were fine with it, but I was like, I can't read your lips, I don't know what's happening. And as much as it frustrates me to sort of put in the chat box, hey, I'm really sorry, I can't hear you, I feel really annoyed by that, because I'm like, no, I shouldn't feel anxious. I am a deaf person, technically. I'm supposed to be getting help, but this is kind of a trying time for everyone. I totally understand that, you know. COVID has proved once again that people can work from home, but working from home has its own issues as a whole. It's not just easy plain sailing, and it's not just, oh, I'll make a cup of tea and I'll come back on my Zoom in like 15 minutes time. It's more like, I've got 20 minutes to shower and I only have 2 spoons left out of my bottle. How am I going to deal with this? I know, have a panic attack. It's literally up to here, and I'm literally feeling my face go red at like how angry I am at all of this. But the point I'm trying to make is that not everything is perfect. Not everything is accessible for a lot of disabled people, whether that's deaf, blind, wheelchair bound, paraplegic, stuff like that. You don't necessarily think if you're able-bodied because you're able-bodied. You have a body that works. Unfortunately for us, ours just doesn't. And unfortunately, I have been blessed with crippled genetics and high intense radiation and chemotherapy, so my body is kind of sticking its middle finger up at me right now and going, don't really care. I think with accessibility as a whole, and I do admit this, I'll raise my hands to this, my college have been absolutely wonderful. You know, they've tried everything they can to make things as smooth as possible. I'm on the Student Voice Council right now, so I'm trying to make slight changes and amendments to things that can help disabled people. That's kind of one of my things that I really feel passionate about doing. However, more can be improved, and I don't say that in a sort of, you must improve this right now. It's more of a, it's going to take its time. I fully understand that, but we have to accept that not everyone has a visible disability. Not everyone is going to just flaunt it and sort of grace everyone's presence with the wonderful wheelchair they have, or the cane that they have, and the walker that they have. You know, it's, some people feel so anxious and ashamed, and I did for a really long time. I didn't like going out in my wheelchair. I didn't like using a cane because I was like, no, screw this. I used to be able to walk really well and now I can't. What's wrong with me? So naturally, it's going to take time for people to open up and be like, you know what? I'm having really bad issues trying to access certain things. And sometimes people are great. They can point you in the right direction. They can make it easier for you. I've had some really good experiences. You know, I went to Switzerland last year with disability access. I cannot fault how both of the airports I went to handled it so bloody well. But there is a problem that some people just don't accept it, and some people will be like, well, I can't see your realness, so you're gonna have to prove it to me. And it's like, whoa, why should I have to prove that I have a disability to a total stranger? I don't think you're on the same level as me, sweetheart. And I think that a majority of people aren't like that, but I've met a few fair of them who want proof that I am disabled, or I have a chronic illness, or I'm deaf, and I'm like, hello, can't hear you. But I think it's just about acceptance. You know, you may be an able-bodied person, you may be perfectly healthy, and you may be absolutely fine accessing everything you need, but try and think about the people who are struggling. Try and raise awareness of it. Try and bring it up if you're on the local council board. Be like, I've realised that the drop curbs that we put in on this street are not exactly as good as they seem. Have you realised that there's only one drop curb, not 2? You know, I've realised that the disabled public toilets are never clean. Why is that? I think it's just trying to raise awareness that nothing is perfect unless it has attention being raised to it. So I hope that makes sense in a sort of way. I didn't want it to just be banging on about a certain issue. I wanted it to be very educational and sort of try and understand from my point of view that it's not just one problem, it's multiple, but we can easily fix things if we bring awareness to it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Please leave a like and comment down below what you thought. Share around, make sure your friends know it. And subscribe as well. More subscribers are welcome. I hope I will be posting more content soon. If I don't, I'll probably see you in October, because that's kind of the mark that we're keeping now. I will see you guys soon.